So again, welcome to today's training. I'm going to back up one slide. Sexual harassment and abusive conduct prevention training for non-supervisory employees. Next slide. So in our human resources department, we have a lot more employees than you're seeing here photographed, but we have a compliance team. And the compliance team is made up of Lisa Winter, who's on the call today. Lisa Winter is our compliance administrator, Title IX coordinator. Michael Hudson, Assistant Director of Human Resources. We have to put temporary in the title because Michael Hudson's serving as a temporary employee. However, Michael has been with the district for quite a considerable amount of years. Very valuable resource. And then we have two HR analysts, employee labor relations, one being myself, Alan Kuykendall, and Linda Subius, who's also on the call as our official ZJ. So that's our compliance team. In addition, you all are probably familiar with Sherry Lee Lewis, who is currently our VP Human Resources, and Dr. Trayshawn Hall Baker, who is our Dean Human Resources. Also, Lori Heyman is our Administrative Assistant 3, Confidential, who assists directly Sherry Lee Lewis as our VP Human Resources, but also plays a critical role on our compliance team. So next slide. So why are all of you guys here? So there's a couple reasons. Maintaining a harassment-free campus and workplace is required by law. So we all know we're here because federal law, California law, Santa Monica City municipal codes, Santa Monica College specifically, we have board policies and academic regulations, but we want you all to be here because maintaining a harassment-free campus and workplace is the right thing to do. So that's the biggest takeaway we want from you guys to have from today's training is it is just the right thing to do. There's a quote we shared here from Alan G. Johnson. Avoidance, exclusion, rejection, and devaluing often happens in ways only noticed by the person experiencing them, and they can happen without anyone intending harm. So that is also a very key takeaway that we have from today's training is that oftentimes complaints that we receive in HR or complaints that managers will receive are behaviors or experiences that an employee could have where the culprit may not have intended any harm, and that's not what is considered when determining if somebody has experienced harassment in the workplace or on campus. It's the individual's experience, and so that's very important when we're conducting ourselves in the workplace, is just being cognizant of how our actions can impact those around us and those that we don't even realize are aware. Our next slide. Why is this important? Okay, so sexual harassment and abusive conduct harm the workplace and learning environment by a few ways. One is increased absenteeism, decreased productivity, low morale, and interpersonal conflict. So as you can imagine, when an employee is experiencing sexual harassment or an abusive conduct in the workplace, there's going to be a natural response that they may not want to go to work. So there's going to be increased absenteeism. When they're at work, they might be focused on other things, and so their productivity goes down, and they just don't have an overall feeling of morale or connectedness with their colleagues. Condoning or not reporting, it is in direct conflict with SMC's values of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. Equity and diversity strengthen you, me, and SMC. And so as we know right now, there's so much going on in the news and the spotlight. Started, I guess it's been over a year now with the Me Too movement coming back into the spotlight. All these issues have come up recently with Black Lives Matter, where we're seeing that that people are not being valued just by who they are as a person, all of us equally. And us being aware of these issues and being equitable and having a diversity focus strengthens all of us. So the goal here of today's training is, one, understand the behavior that is expected from you. So there is certain expectations of all of us when we step on campus, when we're working in our role here at Santa Monica College. We want to ensure a harassment-free workplace, not only for you, but your colleagues, for all of us here on the campus, including our students. Create a workplace of respect. And so that is a big key portion of this training. Reflect on our behaviors to create a culture of self-awareness. So self-awareness is oftentimes where we can begin the work of creating a workplace of respect, and identify the available SMC resources. And we're also going to identify the resources that are available to you outside of SMC. And is there any question? Do any of you guys have any questions up to this point in terms of why you're here today? Okay, good. Okay, so FAQs. How often must I take this training? So this training is required by law that you all take it once every 2 years. So the deadline for this year is December 31st, 2020. And then so January 1st, 2021, there's going to be another requirement that within that next 2 years, you take this training again. That's how this works. But if you ever want a refresher, there's some people that just want to make sure that they understand these concepts. You can always take one of the trainings on Keenan Safe Colleges. And if we have a training in the future, you're always welcome to attend that as well. But the mandate is that you take it once every 2 years. Your supervisor is required to take a 2-hour training, so a longer training, and it's also every 2 years. And we do have people that work at multiple employers, or maybe that they have a business of their own that falls under that requirement. And if you do this training, often other employers will accept the certificate of completion from this training to fulfill the requirement at the other employer. Okay, now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty. So this is where we're going to try to get some participation from you all. And you can, we were hoping to get a poll up, but we were not able to get a poll up for this training. But feel free to throw some of your ideas into the chat box. And so we're going to go through these. So number one, approximately how many out of 10 women and how many out of 10 men do you believe have been sexually harassed sometime during their life? So this is in their whole life. How many, what percentage of women and what percentage of men do you all feel have been experienced sexual harassment sometime during their life? And so what we're trying to show here in this results, this is all by surveys, and it's to show that there are some differences in between who identify as women and who identify as men in terms of what they experience in terms of sexual harassment in the course of their life.
We're getting a range of answers. Some say 10 out of 10 women, 8 out of 10 men, 8 out of 10 women, and 2 out of 4 men.
So with this, so the results for this one, it's 6 out of 10 women, so 60% of women and 30% of men have reported being sexually harassed during the course of their life. With that said, one key thing to note is oftentimes for people who identify as men, they might not feel comfortable reporting because of the implications if they do report being less masculine. There's certain things, and then if you break it down even more, me and Lisa were actually having a discussion about, we've actually been discussing this quite often these days, is that even when you break it down more from men, when you break it down to Black men or Latinx, brown men, there's the numbers of who will actually report is really low. It does not mean that it doesn't occur. It means that people are not speaking up. So let's go into some of these other scenarios. What percentage of transgender employees have been harassed or discriminated against while on the job? Okay. What do you all think is the percentage of transgender employees who have experienced this?
We're getting a consensus here of 100%, 10 out of 10, 100%.
Very close, very close. So it's 90% of I mean, that might, I don't know what you all feel, but once you get up to 90%, in grading terms, that's like an A. That means like almost perfect. I don't think you can really get much higher than 90%. How often is 100? So what we see from those numbers is that we should be very sensitive to our transgender, if we're transgender, or our colleagues or students who are transgender, because it is just the survey results show that these individuals are experiencing harassment and discrimination while on the job, and I'm sure it's probably similar when they're enrolled as a student. Oh, Carol, did you have something? Go ahead, Carol, you can unmute.
So are you talking about California? Because especially with LGBTQ, it might be different if you're talking about Mississippi than California. Is this nation?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm sure these are just general polls, and I don't have exactly where this came from. I'm assuming the results are from California because we pulled most of this data from trainings that are SB 1343 related, which are for California. But absolutely, yes. Like for me, I'm from a very small town in rural South. I mean, population 6,000. And so people will experience oftentimes more harassment and discrimination in those areas. So that is a very good point. I think even still in California, did you have something you want to add, Linda? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just
we have such a small group, people can feel free to talk.
Yeah, I know a number of transgender people, and I can say it's bad here too. There are a certain amount of people who are woke, but I know some extremely talented, capable transgenders who just have a horrible time everywhere they go.
Sure.
Yeah, so I think that I'm not going to go through all of these results, but when you break it down, sexual harassment complaints are filed by women of color. When you break down, there's a lot of intersectionality here. So sex-based discrimination, and then when you could top it in based on racism, a lot of when you have multiple layers, oftentimes people that find themselves in those intersections where they can check off multiple boxes, oftentimes their experience in the workplace, they can experience things on a much higher percentage than somebody. I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. Somebody that, like me, identify as a white male. I'm also a gay white male, so I've experienced some, sometimes I don't necessarily feel it was discrimination, but some behaviors that I didn't appreciate throughout the course of my years. But just checking off white male, I am probably going to experience less discrimination in the workplace than somebody that checks off 3 or 4 of those boxes. So it's just something for us to consider when we're at work, that our experience might be much different from the person sitting in the cubicle next to us, and we should always be respectful of that and be cognizant of it. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So workplace of respect. What does it look like? What does it not look like? And how do we create it? I think this is one of the most important things. Respect is directly correlated to how we treat each other. And how we treat each other is not only when we're interacting with each other, but it's how we operate when we're not interacting with each other. Because like I said earlier, you do not know who is observing you or who's in earshot. There's many things that go into considering that. So what does it not look like? Lack of respect can be seen in unacceptable workplace conduct, okay? There's different types of unacceptable conduct. And when we talk about unacceptable conduct, there's certain types of conduct that are going to be unlawful. And when we say unlawful, that means it could lead to some kind of disciplinary action within Santa Monica College, or some conduct can even have implications outside of Santa Monica College. Unacceptable conduct could also include things that are not necessarily going to lead to discipline, but it might be something that we want to consider, definitely talk to each other, and as ourselves want to be aware and be cognizant of. But all of these factor into a workplace of respect. So we have unlawful behavior, which includes sex discrimination and sexual harassment. And once you get into that category of unlawful, those are the things that are going to have some implications, liabilities. And then you have things such as rude behavior. Those can include things like intentionally excluding or interrupting. Those alone, if it was just a single instance of interrupting, it might not lead to unlawful misconduct, disciplinary action, but all of these things go into a workplace of respect. That's why they're included in unacceptable conduct. And then we go into bullying and abusive conduct. Those things, yelling, making threats. We'll go into more detail on these in the coming slides. How do we create it? I think this is the important thing. So I'm not going to discuss, we all know that there's federal, California law, city laws, and SMC has our policies and regulations. Those are the things that we have available on the slides. I don't think we have to go into too much detail of them because we can't get around those. Those are law or policies or regulations. The things that are really important are the things that, like here, self-awareness. This is not something that you're required to do, but it's how we can create this environment of respect. And this is, when you think of growing, when you think of, especially when we talk about sexism, racism, things of this nature, the only way that you could truly deal with them, eradicate them, is by each person in themselves becoming aware of where they might have these issues, microaggressions, macroaggressions. That all comes about through self-awareness, and so that's why that piece is very important. Then we go to speaking up. Speaking up oftentimes can be very difficult for somebody who feels that they may be experiencing some of that conduct from the prior slide. This can happen through direct conversation with the person that you're having an issue with. That can sometimes be difficult. You can report it. You can talk to your supervisor. You can talk to a colleague. There might be somebody that has witnessed it with you and you feel comfortable talking to them about it. So speaking up, that oftentimes can be difficult, but that is one way to create this environment. Bystander intervention. This is a piece I know Linda is very adamant about or passionate about and has led some trainings on. Bystander intervention sometimes is the #1 way that we can create change, because as I mentioned, speaking up for somebody that is in that victim category is oftentimes very difficult to do. And so sometimes it puts that onus on us as bystanders to there's different ways you could do it: distract, direct conversation, support, and report. And there's a couple points made on there. Silence is often perceived as acceptance. If you're witness to something, let's say there's a group and there's somebody that's being bullied or somebody that's being harassed, if you're there, part of that group, your silence is often perceived as acceptance. We saw this recently with the George Floyd tapes, where not only the officer who had their knee on George Floyd's neck, but the other officers who stood there and didn't stop it were perceived as accepting the behavior. And so it's really important to be the ally you'd like to have in the workplace. So be the person that, if you were in that person's shoes, how would you want the bystanders around to respond to the situation? Okay, so now we're going to get into sexual harassment. Okay, so sexual harassment is a form of discrimination based on sex, gender. That includes pregnancy, childbirth, or related medical conditions, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientations. Individuals of any gender can be the target of sexual harassment. So that means oftentimes, like we mentioned on a previous slide, females have reported experiencing sexual harassment more, but it can also be males. In addition, the perpetrator of sexual harassment can be male or female. Oftentimes our biases assume that it's always a male, but it can be either female or male. Unlawful sexual harassment does not have to be motivated by sexual desire. This is something I like to drive home because we don't assume that. You could have, for example, let's say that there is a manager who is a gay male and there is an employee who is a heterosexual female. There could be sexual harassment that occurs and there's no sexual desire there. There could be comments. We'll go into more detail on that, but that is one big point, is there has to be no desire in order for sexual harassment to have occurred. Sexual harassment may involve harassment of person of the same gender as the harasser, regardless of either person's sexual orientation or gender identity. I kind of touched on that already. It is unwelcome, unwanted verbal, nonverbal, visual, or physical conduct of a sexual nature. And there's two types of this harassment: quid pro quo and hostile work environment. And both of these we're going to be going into in more detail. And do we have any, at this point, anybody have any questions? Or I know it's a lot of information. And you guys we're going to make these slides available to you. Okay. Okay. So did you know? So sexual harassment, this can occur at the workplace or outside of the workplace. And so this is there, that could include, let's say you go to a conference, let's say staff members meet for happy hour someplace out of work, or let's say somebody invites you outside of work for something and then a situation occurs. And intent is not the determining factor on whether conduct is deemed to be sexual harassment. This can include jokes related to sex, gender, and sexual orientation, including stereotypes, commenting on one's body or appearance, demands for sexual favors or attention. I would say demands for sexual favors or attention is quite, we understand where that falls under sexual harassment. Jokes related to sex, gender, or sexual orientation, oftentimes somebody could harmlessly feel like they just want to make people laugh. They heard this joke on the radio and they bring it into the office. And this is where we all need to be very mindful, not only of how we interact with each other, but who's in earshot. We're in the office there, you know, where people are moving around the office, and you might intend for something just to be funny, to be uplifting. And what you might consider funny or uplifting might have the complete opposite response for one of our colleagues or students or visitors to the campus. Also, commenting on one's body or appearance. You might be thinking you're making a compliment to somebody and they may have a completely different experience to that compliment. And so those two, I think, are really important for us to be cognizant of. And throughout, even in somebody that you have a good relationship with, we just have to be very mindful of everybody's experience. And that's all I can really say about that. I've learned a lot over the past couple months especially on that one, in terms of commenting on people's body or appearance, issues that you might think you are, like I said, just complimenting or commenting on. It could completely have a different response for somebody else. Okay. Another area to discuss is that not only you, your supervisor, or Santa Monica College can be held personally liable if sued for sexual harassment. And it goes into the areas where people can be liable under California and federal laws. And so not only are we interested in creating this workplace of respect because it's the right thing to do, but also we could all be held liable if something were to occur at Santa Monica College. So we're all invested in ensuring that the workplace is free of this conduct. And so next, quid pro quo. I'm sure some of you are probably familiar with this, Latin for this, for that. We have this funny little picture making it blatant. You will date my daughter or you're fired. So sometimes it could be that bold, and sometimes it might not be that in your face. Quid pro quo is when a person in a position of authority makes educational or employment benefits conditioned upon an individual's willingness to engage in or tolerate unwanted sexual conduct. Submission to or rejection of conduct results in an adverse action. Job education benefits promised explicitly or implicitly in exchange for sexual favors or denied if sexual favors are not given. So this is this is on this slide what I think is really something to remember is the victim may voluntarily submit to or engage in an activity, yet the behavior can still be considered unwelcome. And so there can be situations where an individual submits to the behavior. Let's say if it was explicitly, let's say somebody of power says or implies, if you do this, you can get, if you do this, you might get a better grade, or you might get that promotion, or you might get a good evaluation. Just because the person on the receiving end complies with that request does not mean that it was not quid pro quo and that it won't result in adverse action on the person explicitly or implicitly making that request. And so that is a really, it's going through with the act does not mean that they are okay with it or that the conduct is acceptable. So we have a scenario. This is when we're all going to get involved. Okay. So Linda, do you want to, I know Linda wants to get involved. Linda, do you want to read the scenario?
Sure.
We know Soleil very well. Soleil's been around in our trainings for a while.
Soleil Summer is a student in Professor I.M. Tree's landscape architecture class. She shares with the professor that her grades are dropping because she doesn't have money to buy her books for the current semester. Professor Tree tells her how much he values student scholarship and promises he'll help her. He tells her he owns a house in Palm Springs with a very nice spa. He offers to allow her to visit his Palm Springs house for tutoring and promised that after her visit, he would give her money to buy school books. Is this unlawful? And if it is sexual harassment,
I would love if somebody would feel comfortable to come live, not necessarily with video, but share their thoughts on this scenario with us. And if nobody wants to talk via verbal, you guys can share in the chat box if you think this is unlawful behavior based on what we've learned. And trust me, these scenarios, I'm sure me, Lisa, Michael, and Linda can argue about it as well. So there's no wrong answer, because a lot of this times this stuff is gray. Oh, Carol. Oh yeah, Dina. Okay, Dina, go ahead. You can unmute.
I'm unmuted. If it were me, I would assume that it was a sexually intentioned situation that would make me very uncomfortable.
So oh, well, I have trigger finger. Okay. So,
and yes,
let's say Soleil did feel uncomfortable, because if you were reading this, you would probably feel, yes, Soleil has reason to feel uncomfortable. A lot of us would feel uncomfortable. So just to give you some background, like if HR were to be, if this was the information HR received in HR complaints at smc.edu, we would definitely be like, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag. And so when we get this type of information, yes, there's a lot of red flags, but we would definitely, based on this information, we would definitely want to get more information. If we received this information, we would reach out to sometimes the person, Soleil, and in certain situations, we would reach out to the professor as well, probably would, once we got that information. And me personally, if I got this, I would say we need more information. One, both people have their side of the story. Was there evidence? You know, we would need to definitely get more information, but this would definitely be cause for concern. And definitely, at least if a professor might say, I didn't have anything intentional, I'm not sexually attracted to Slay is a female. I'm a gay male. But like we said though, sexual desire is not always the deciding factor, or is not a deciding factor. So this one, we definitely want more information, but we would definitely be concerned in investigating it. It does not mean that this would be concluded as sexual harassment. So what type of, now this one can go in the chat box. What type of sexual harassment would this be if it was deemed sexual harassment? Or you can yell it out via unmuting. Yes, if it was, so out of the two, hostile work environment or quid pro quo? Jeopardy music, yes, quid pro quo. Okay, so we're gonna go on to the next one. Okay, so hostile work environment. See, that was easy because I didn't even go into hostile work environment yet. So what is hostile work environment? I mean, the word kind of, I mean, the name kind of gives you a clue. So hostile work environment, sexual harassment, which occurs when unwelcome comments or conduct based on sex unreasonably interferes with your work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. You may experience sexual harassment even if the offensive conduct was not aimed directly at you. So these are all really key. We've kind of touched on this before. The harassment must be severe or pervasive to be unlawful. A single act of harassment may be sufficiently severe to be unlawful. Okay, so let's unwrap a couple of these. So, okay, so this first one, interferes with your work performance. So that first bullet, we kind of discussed that. When somebody's experiencing a hostile work environment, they're going to have that absenteeism, that their performance is going to be affected. So when somebody is experiencing that based on the conduct, oftentimes that will be considered a hostile work environment, depending on all the circumstances. Even if it's not aimed at you. So let's say two colleagues are having a conversation and it falls into some of those examples. Maybe it's sexual jokes or discussing sexual history, things of that nature. You might not even be part of the conversation, but they're not taking into account that you're in earshot. Severe or pervasive to be unlawful. And the last one, a single act may be sufficient. Oh yeah, so a single act may be, or it may not be sufficiently severe to be unlawful. So what occurred is going to be what is our deciding factor on if something was creating a hostile work environment for you. Again, the thing to point out is anytime that there's something that occurs that's brought to our attention that would even be remotely falling under hostile work environment, we're going to look at it. It's going to red flag us. And we're going to determine, is this experience something that is severe or pervasive to be unlawful, or if that single act, if it was one single act, is sufficiently severe to be considered unlawful. So these are all the types of things that we have to take in consideration. Just because something is not, oh, go ahead.
I was wondering if I could just add the word.
No, I'm muting you, Michael. I'm just kidding. This is I
think the FEH is
that
the words severe and pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
That can be rather subjective, but I think the tendency is that DFEH, the agency that are looking at this, are moving more toward providing help for the person who's feeling the discomfort or being subjected to the offensive situation. So I think it's good for people to think you can't hide behind that definition. Oh, it wasn't severe or pervasive enough to be on.
Okay.
Plus, you don't know, just because you only witnessed a certain act or you only did a certain act that was relatively mild. First of all, by doing that, you're kind of giving permission for that kind of culture to continue. And, that same person may be experiencing it from 10 other people.
Good point. So it's not just the experience they're having from one particular person, it's the entire work environment as a collective. So one thing, like I want to point out, if we receive this information, even if something doesn't fall to the level of unlawful, there's going to be certain situations that we are still going to address, possibly internally. It might not even go to discipline, but it might involve calling somebody in real quick and just having a discussion and saying, you may not have felt that this behavior was inappropriate. You might not have had any malintent. However, you could be on a path to where you're going to get yourself or somebody else in trouble. And so that could occur behind the scenes, and not everybody will be privy to that information, but trust me, we take these things very seriously. I apologize. I'm going to go off video for 1 second. I'm going to keep talking, but I need to blow my nose real quick. I apologize. Sorry if that's TMI. 1 second. Excuse me. Talks amongst yourself. Oh yeah. Okay, just a quickie. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay, so did you know, hostile work environment, a single incident of harassing conduct is now sufficient to create a hostile work environment if the harassing conduct has unreasonably interfered with the employee's work performance or created an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. Decline in productivity not required to establish harassment. It is sufficient that the conduct so altered working conditions as to make it more difficult to do the job. Okay, so what that's saying is, if I'm working in a hostile work environment, I may be just using every effort I can to make sure that my productivity doesn't decrease, but it doesn't mean it's not impacting me and more difficult for me to keep that productivity up. Totality of the circumstances matter, including stray remarks by non-decision makers. Okay. Does anybody, do you three other compliance team members have anything to comment on that last slide, that last point? Totality of the circumstances matter, including stray remarks by non-decision makers. Okay. Next, oh, yay, we have another scenario, crowd participation. So I'm just going to go ahead and read this one, but you all in the audience, think about if this is unlawful behavior, and if somebody, please join us. So we have Ben and Stacy, they're co-workers. Ben often poured out his relationship woes to Stacy. This could happen. We know these types of people. During these conversations, he would touch her shoulder. Sometimes he called her at home to complain about his failed romantic relationships. Stacy filed a claim of hostile work environment. Does anybody want to jump in here on if this is unlawful behavior, hostile work environment? And if yes or no, what should Stacy do? Come on, come on. You could type it in the chat box too. That's fine. No wrong answer. Like I said, we can argue. I'm sure we'll probably, yes, and she should file a claim. So Carol, what would you think what makes you think that this is unlawful behavior?
Well, I think that calling at home is the clincher.
You know what, because some people, this is where I said, we need more information. Because to me, what if Stacy gave Ben her phone number and they had that? I mean, how else did Ben get Stacy's phone number? Unless he looked it up illegally in the payroll system. But it would definitely be, for me, my thought, and then I'll let my colleagues give their opinion. In this scenario, based on what we have, of course, we would hear Stacy's claim. If I received Stacy's claim, I would first say, I just clicked to the other slide. I would want to have a conversation with Stacy and find out information like, did you share your number with Ben? Like, does he think you guys are friends? Did you have a conversation with Ben that you don't necessarily want to hear about his relationship woes? The one thing that does stick out to me though is the touching on the shoulder. As we mentioned before, some people touching in some cultures is how you show a bond, friendship, things like that, but we don't know what our colleague or our friend experienced, and that's where the issue is. So that would be something that would want to be addressed. Would it be unlawful touching on the shoulder? Is that pervasive? I don't know if this would fall under unlawful, but we might want to say to Ben, just be cognizant of people's boundaries. Ben may have thought him and Stacy were much closer because they're talking out of work. It doesn't mean, so there's some gray areas here. This would definitely, in my opinion, fall under gray area. I'm rambling now. Anybody else want to?
Not rambling. You're absolutely right. We're seeing something that there's been an existing relationship. So we'd have to ask, you know, how have conversations, how many times they talked, and what triggered her to file this complaint this time? Maybe
Yeah, why this time? Exactly. Yeah, good point. So Lisa pointed out he does this often. So was there specifically something, because that's a good point. And this is what, so you guys can see, because oftentimes people say, oh, I said something to HR. We go into this much detail, and we have to when we get this kind of information, because maybe in this last conversation, Ben discussed details, physical, intimate, sexual details, body parts. So that could be something. So we don't know. Maybe he said he assaulted or something that he thought that Stacy found was assault. You know, we don't know. We don't know. We need more information.
Alan, you made a really, you asked a good question that where I made an assumption yesterday when I presented the same slide. So I assumed that he obtained the phone number, that they already were buddies outside of work, where they're used to calling. Now, if he had called the phone number and obtained it through illegal sources, or let's say unapproved sources,
They already have, he has access, part of their job, you know, like us.
But that would still be a question, right, to ask. I would say, how did he obtain the number, and you know, how did you react when he called?
Yeah. See, so you guys are seeing that there's sometimes it's not a, oftentimes we have to get a lot more information. However, there still could be pieces of it that we would want to let the alleged perpetrator know. If this continues, it can lead to something more serious. So now we have a video for you, and this video is going to be example of sexual harassment in the workplace.
So will I see you at that 3 o'clock?
Yeah, I'll be there. Oh, you got it. I haven't had sex in a month. Well, excuse me. What school did you go to?
Arizona State.
I didn't know they had hot girls at ASU. What's that thing, spray painted on? I want to spray.
See, and this one was just echoes in the stairwell.
They promoted her? Mm-hmm. I know 5 guys more qualified than that. Only 5.
Okay, so we get the point. So before I go into these, we saw on that's why sometimes these videos are really good at something. Seeing it makes it more, we can hear it, but something seeing it. We saw that in that one situation, I'm assuming it's a colleague, thought that they were complimenting them by saying, oh, I didn't know there was hot girls that went to that school. I'm sure they felt that that was a compliment. However, on the receiving end, they're not receiving it as a compliment. There was another, sorry, just slipped my brain, but as we saw, oftentimes it's not direct, it's things that they're that are occurring around them, even the screensaver on that one, or the background on that one person's computer, and it's their laptop. So I'm thinking there might be their personal laptop that they also use for business. Is all those things. It's all about being cognizant and respectful of your colleagues. That one instance, maybe just walking by and seeing some females in a bikini might not be an issue, but compiled, as Linda said, this colleague did this, now this colleague did that. Compiling them can create a hostile work environment. So now we're going to go into the 3 different kinds. Verbal, that could include foul or obscene language, derogatory comments, explicit discussions about sexual activities. We saw that when the people were exiting the elevator. Jokes, oh yeah, that was somebody, 2 colleagues were making some jokes that somebody overheard. Mocking an accent, comments about other people's physical attributes. And so again, a lot of these can be something you're just trying to be uplifting or funny or complimentary, and it just might not be perceived or received that way. Physical, this is more obvious: touching, grabbing, massaging, hugging, impeding or blocking movement, assault, and then more blatant assault. So again, hugging, some people might just not be comfortable, and you might think it's not your experience or what you feel, it's what the person receiving feels or experiences. Visual, leering, sexual gestures, sending graphic emails, text messages, social media posts, or jokes, displaying sexual explicit objects, pictures, cartoons, graffiti, or posters. And we saw in that video the person just kind of leering at the person, staring. And so Michael Hudson, when he does this, mentions if you have to ask yourself what is too long, because people go, oh, what is too long? If you have to ask yourself what is too long, it's too long. Just like if you ask, like, oh, does this outfit look okay to myself? If you're, usually they say, if you ask yourself, is this outfit appropriate for work? If you ask yourself, it's probably better just to avoid it. So if you think that you're staring at somebody too long, just avoid, you probably are. Another scenario. Here we go. So, and again, feel free to join in, or I'll call you out. No, I'm just kidding. I won't do that. Tina's coworker began to make comments about her appearance and what he would like to do to her. He then asked her out on a date. She refused and notified Human Resources. That coworker stopped all communications with Tina, but continued to stare at her for long lengths of time throughout the workday. So, is this, we're going to make this one quick. Is this unlawful behavior? And you can just throw it in the chat box. Yes. So we already learned that staring for long lengths of time would fall under visual. Tina should again report it to HR, or we already know that Tina feels comfortable reporting things to Human Resources, and so hopefully that they feel comfortable doing that. Their colleague was already aware, and so this would be something that would probably, could most likely fall under unlawful behavior and would be treated that way. Another scenario, we just want to make sure that this is all drilled in. Okay, so John began making advances towards Tina a few weeks into starting his new role as department manager. Okay, so this is a superior. After rejecting John's actions and requests for a date, Tina started receiving suggestive messages in her company email account. A few weeks later, John started leaving little gifts on her desk, and Tina responded by sending an email to John making it clear that she wasn't interested in a personal relationship and asked him to stop all of his actions towards her. In the days to come, Tina began receiving text messages from John trying to pressure her into paying attention to him. Yes or no? What do you guys think? I think this is probably an easy one.
This is unlawful behavior, yes, and Tina should forward all those emails and text messages to Human Resources.
Good job, Leah. And this one, I mean, just reading it, if we got wind of this, we would probably be taking very swift action and definitely getting that department manager's VP involved. It would be stop everything, because this seems pretty severe, because the department manager went to a 2-hour training and is still not getting it. Okay, so now we're going to go into work.
Can I make a quick comment,
Yeah.
Alan? I really like that answer from Leah, because we also need, it's always very helpful for us to have physical evidence.
Yes.
And there are people who have told us about things, and it was so offensive, I erased the text. If we have that text in our hands, that's a smoking gun. That person cannot deny it. So that was a really good answer from you.
Yeah, that is. And somebody mentioned, Dina mentioned that we know they did send a text or an email, but if somebody were to be, like Dina said, smart and not dumb, and did this all verbal because they knew that there wouldn't be a paper trail, what you could always do, even if it's not sexually related, anytime you feel discriminated or conduct is bad, you can always quickly send yourself an email that's date and time stamped, because then when it's a matter of one person's word versus another, if somebody had tracked a conversation via email and date stamped, it's going to still hold up a little bit more than having nothing when it's just two people. So if you felt uncomfortable in a situation, you didn't think it was to the point where you needed to notify HR or your supervisor, but you just wanted to document it, you can always send yourself a quick email, and then it's documented. And then if in the future there's been compiling of this occur where you feel like I want to move forward, you have this track of emails that you've sent yourself of a history that are, because sometimes you won't remember dates and times and all this kind of stuff. Okay, go through this. So workplace violence. Okay, so that, when you say violence, that sounds pretty whoa, but let's go into it. Referred to as abusive conduct. Conduct of an employer or employee in the workplace done with malice that a reasonable person would find hostile, offensive, and is unrelated to an employer's legitimate business interests. Okay, key here is reasonable person also. Okay, abusive conduct may include repeated verbal abuse, threatening, intimidating, or humiliating, sorry, the tongue twister, I didn't know I had such a difficulty with it, humiliating verbal or physical conduct, gratuitous sabotage, or undermining a person's work. Okay, so it's very clear on what is, so this is where we have some differences. There's abusive conduct and there's unlawful harassment. Okay, so abusive conduct is not directed at someone's membership in a protected classification. So those protected classifications could be things like age, like me, I just turned 40 last year. So on my 40th birthday, I'm now in a protected class. It could be your gender, your sexual orientation. There's a list of them. We have them towards the end. So abusive conduct is not directed at someone based on that. Okay. It's not illegal, meaning you might not go to jail or have some kind of implications outside of SMC, but this abusive conduct is prohibited by SMC in the campus let me just start over. SMC prohibits workplace campus violence and anti-bullying. So it might not be illegal, but SMC prohibits it. This harassing conduct is directed at someone's membership in the protected classification. This type of harassment is illegal. Okay, so that's the differences there. It doesn't mean that one is going to be accepted versus the other. Both of them are going to be treated diligently by SMC. And so we have another scenario. Michael has an intellectual disability. He works as an administrative clerk. Recently, he has had difficulties keeping up with the volume of emails and he has made some mistakes. How am I doing on time? Should I?
It is 11, just a few minutes to 11.
Okay, I'm gonna go through this one, but we're not gonna spend too much time on this one, okay? As part of the one-on-one, Michael's supervisor asked about the mistakes and the difficulties of recent weeks. So I'm just going to give the gist of this one. So Michael has an intellectual disability. We're assuming by this, Michael has gone through the appropriate channels to have medical documentation on file with SMC or whatever employer this is, and the manager is aware of it, okay? So Michael's performance has slipped. The supervisor has discussed it with Michael, has offered some other things like, do you need to do something else in the meantime? Michael is angry about this and thinks the supervisor wants to write him up. Would we consider this workplace bullying? Let's do quickly a yes or no. What do you guys think? Is this bullying? No. Okay, so we got to know. Yeah, my feeling on this one, I agree. This is not, okay? I would actually, even though we do want to consider the employee's experience, like we mentioned in another slide, in this situation, I believe Michael's supervisor is actually just trying to be thoughtful and considerate. However, this would be a situation if Michael really did feel offended or concerned, Michael could just talk to the supervisor and say, no, I really want to continue my work, continue with my current work. This is where, on that previous slide where it said a reasonable person. So we receive complaints sometimes where an employee is saying, I'm being bullied on the job or I'm experiencing workplace violence. We have to look at the situation and truly say, would a reasonable person feel that this is bullying or workplace violence? And sometimes the employee may feel a certain way and we have to just explain, well, no, that's actually your supervisor's role, because the supervisor does have certain responsibilities as a manager, as a supervisor. And so although sometimes it might not be enjoyable, it's not necessarily bullying. Workplace bullying. This behavior may include teasing, belittling comments, yelling, name calling, threats of physical harm, interfering with an employee's ability to complete work. Bullying behavior may exist at any levels of an organization, a manager, a supervisor, or a coworker. Okay, so those go into what is bullying. Again, oftentimes managing staff is not bullying, it's managing, but these are the instances when it would be considered bullying. And we have an example. I think I'm going to skip the example. What do you guys think? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Okay, I see it. Yep, let's go through it. Okay, so now these are the important ones. So discrimination based on a protected class. I'm not going to go through each of these, but you can see there are a lot of protected classes. In another training, I can't recall, I think Linda had done a training. We asked the whole group, who does not have one of these? And I think we had like maybe one person out of like 50 attendees who couldn't check off a box. Okay, so we almost all fall under a protected class. And so that's why it's important to be very respectful of each other in the workplace, because almost everybody is protected from discrimination based on a protected class. Now, the behavior has to be directly tied to that protected class, but sometimes we don't wear our protected class on our sleeve. I know I look much younger than 40, but I am over 40. So you cannot discriminate me based on my age. Okay, understanding gender. I'm just going to do a quick second on this video. I won't do too long. I think it's a good video. It discusses gender.
Now you will watch a video about gender. The video is audio described for people.
And pause it for a second. Gender is what people identify. It's not necessarily what they were assigned at birth. And right now it is very, I would say over the past couple years, you'll hear when people mention pronouns, things of that nature. It's very important for us to be cognizant of how people identify. And so I'm just going to show a brief amount of this one because it goes into, gives us just a little idea of how broad this can be.
People who are blind or have low vision. In a classroom, two people present.
We're going to take 2 minutes to talk about gender.
Oh, this has nothing to do with me. Well, actually, gender does have to do with you.
Not to me.
Hold on. Everyone has a relationship with gender.
Whether you've thought about gender a little or a lot, it has.
Skipping forward.
You get the point. Yep. Every single person watching this video has been taught about gender from the very beginning, from birth.
We like to define people, right? So when people are born,
Society defines them by looking at their reproductive organs and labels them male or female.
It's a girl. Well, actually, it's more complicated than that.
Gender can be broken down into gender expression or gender identity. Let's look at some gender identities.
I'm Sophie, and I'm cisgender. The majority of people in our world identify as cisgender, sometimes without us even knowing it. Cis means I identify with the gender I was assigned at birth. When I was born, the doctor said,
"It's a girl."
And I still identify as a woman today.
Hi, I'm Tamara. I'm also a woman. So when I was a baby,
Man holds a blue blanket.
It's a boy.
Tamara pulls away the blanket, revealing a pink one.
no. I'm a trans woman. I identify as a woman, even though when I was born, I was assigned something different.
A man who has deaf signs.
I'm Garrett. I'm a cisgender man. When I was born, everyone said,
People throw blue balloons.
Okay, so I'm going to stop it there. What we want to gather from this video is, one, what gender somebody was given at birth is not always going to be what they identify with currently, and we need to be respectful of that. And sometimes it's not as obvious based on the biases that we have, because we all have biases, and it's not as obvious as looking at them based on predetermined definitions of what gender is. Bless you, Lisa. I saw that. Did you know? Okay, so this is the important things to know about gender. Okay. Intentionally calling a transgender person the name used prior to transition is considered harassment. This is referred to as dead naming. Intentionally using the incorrect pronoun, she, he, they. So again, we talked, this is, when you don't know somebody's preferred pronoun, it's better to use they. If somebody lets you know, oftentimes you'll see in emails or on people's LinkedIn, they identify themselves. So you'll, if you're not aware, this is becoming more prevalent nowadays. People will identify what their pronoun is, okay? And if you know that, that's them saying, I would like to be referred to this way. If you intentionally continue to use a different pronoun, it is considered harassment. May not oppose appearance, dress, or grooming standards inconsistent with gender identity or expression, with limited exception. Demanding that employee use or objecting to use of the restroom that does not correspond with their gender identity is harassment, okay? When referring to the restrooms, oftentimes we take off, oh, okay. Sorry, Michael, I just got your note about the clothes, thank you. So people that are transgender oftentimes receive discrimination if they go into, let's say that they're a transgender woman and they go into the women's restroom, they can experience harassment. I think this next slide talks about that. Equal access, so people that identify as transgender, common areas where they're harassed occur in the restroom. Equal access to facilities regardless of the sex of the employee, as the employee must be permitted to use facilities that correspond to their gender identity or gender expression, not the gender identity or expression that you think is appropriate. It's what they identify or express. Dress may not impose appearance, dress, or grooming standards inconsistent with gender identity or expression. We talked about this, the usage. Employer may not require applicant or employees to designate gender, okay? So what this is showing is there's just a lot of protections now, fortunately, for people based on gender identity expression, gender identity and gender expression, okay? So the key takeaways here: gender protections include transgender people and strengthens protections against discrimination based on gender identity and expression. Keys here: don't assume somebody's gender identity, check your biases, assess the situation, ask yourself how you can support trans people. For me, when I was a kid, when I went to McDonald's, oftentimes I wanted to get, when McDonald's had the Happy Box or whatever, Happy Meal, and they would say, do you want the girl toy or the boy toy? And generally I wanted what they identified as the girl toy. And this is when the biases, come into play. And we have to check our own biases and how uncomfortable. My mother had to always say, we want the girl toy. And I identified as a male. And I had to say I wanted the boy toy, which happened to be what you classify as the girl toy. So we need to check our biases, and we need to not assume things. And we also need to ask ourselves, like we mentioned prior, 90% of trans people experience harassment or discrimination on the job. And so we should ask ourselves, if we know somebody is trans, how can we support them in the workplace? Okay, that could be being their ally, it could be being a bystander, it could be many different things. Ooh, Title IX. Lisa smiles. This is Lisa's area of expertise. So Title IX. Title IX, what is it? This is discrimination on the basis of sex. The long short of it is it's and affirmative consent, which is another important piece of this. It prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex. Who SMC employees and students wear SMC locations and events. Okay. Examples of sexual harassment under Title IX include sexual assault, sexual battery, assault and/or violence, including rape, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. Okay. We're actually doing good on time. I like it. This is so affirmative consent, because Title IX goes with, and Lisa, please feel free to jump in if I say anything. If I'm here, my boss is the guru of Title IX, and so I'm nervous to say the wrong thing. Okay, so in the state of California, consent is affirmative and continuous. Is that correct? Oh yeah, there it is. It's in my notes. Continuous. It can be withdrawn at any time. So this video is going to make it so easy for us to understand consent. But affirmative and continuous, and can be withdrawn. And it shouldn't be assumed. So where could this be? Oh, I date this person. We have intimate relations every night. And so, hello, I can have sex with them anytime I want them. Yeah, want to with them. That's, duh. No, that is not the case. It needs to be affirmative and continuous. Let's watch this video, because we like this video here in HR. Let's see here. Close caption.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no, thank you, then don't make them tea at all.
Oops. I click, see, this is what happens. I click something.
If you're still struggling, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but Unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people.
I think you guys get the point on this one. The key here, and Lisa, if you want to add anything, being the Title IX guru, is that just don't assume anything. It needs to be affirmative and clear. And just because you started something, somebody can say no at any time, and no means no. And Lisa, do you have anything to add to this section?
Just one more thing, that the consent has to be verbal. You can't.
Oh,
imply,
yeah. Thank you for that. Yes.
You can't imply that the person is going to agree. It has to be yes. Do you want sex? Yes, I do. Great.
So, like, if you're at an event, just because somebody who you're with goes back to your apartment with you, you might assume, oh, well, they knew what I meant. Just because they come back to the apartment with you does not mean yes. Thank you, Lisa. So now, available resources to you. So how do you file a complaint? Okay. You have to, this is a complaint. One, if you ever have a question, a issue, a complaint, we have this handy dandy email address right here, hrcomplaints@smc.edu. You could send an email to that email address. It's going to come to like all of us that are on the 4 of us that are on this meeting, plus a couple other people that I mentioned earlier who are on the compliance team. We'll review it and respond to you with the available resources. And we respond like that, oftentimes even on the weekend. So if you ever have a question, you can always email us. We're not trying to keep you from going to the state chancellor's office, because if it's something that we're required to report to the state chancellor's office, we're going to do so. We're also going to give you all of the available resources to you, because that's something that we do. And these are some of the other available resources. So an employee might come to us with a situation. We'll say, if you want to file an official complaint, here's the complaint form. But also, here's some other resources that might be beneficial to you. Some things I want to point out as employees: one, we are the EEOC and the DFEH. Those are the people that make sure laws are being complied with. But also, something that employees might not know about is the Employee Assistance Service for Education, EASE. This is something available to all of us as SMC employees. It's from the Los Angeles County Office of Education, and they offer, you can have counseling services with a professional through EASE. I think you get like 3 visits with them, and then for free. And we're not going to know here at SMC. This is an outside agency, and it's something that a lot of employees don't know. And I've known colleagues that have utilized it. Maybe they're having issues with their children or at home. It could be on the job or at home, and it's completely confidential, and you get actual counselors that know what they're doing. So that's a great resource that we have here, and available to you, and you can also share that with your colleagues. There's also the SMC website, SMC Campus Police if you had an emergency, and there's this Live Safe app. I'm not very familiar with it. I know some colleagues are, but it's something that SMC has, and it's people that are familiar with apps, it's something you can utilize quite easily. And then, of course, if you file a complaint, you are protected from retaliation. Some individuals are nervous about filing a complaint because they're worried about retaliation. Once it's on our radar, HR knows, and you file the complaint, you're protected against retaliation. And so, one, in terms of your evaluations, things of that nature, everything goes through HR anyways when there's going to be something possibly negative about you. And so if you have a complaint, it would be very difficult for a superior to retaliate against an employee here at SMC, because we're all kind of involved in those situations. Here's the district policies, and again, you'll get these slides. Municipal codes, state legislation, and federal legislation. And then here we are, because we wanted you to see us all dolled up versus via Zoom. Okay, so here's our information. Anytime you have a question, you can reach out to any of us. We're all here via email and phone. Even in the remote setting, we still get our voicemails. And you can also reach out to us if there's something serious that you want to report via HR complaints, but you can reach out to us individually. And then we would also like to ask if you have a smartphone and you are willing to do an evaluation, you can use that QR. If you're familiar with QRs, you can scan it right there, or we can, when we email this to you, but you could also visit the Survey Gizmo link and submit your evaluation. Trust me, if you say anything negative, I'm not going to take it seriously. I'll cry for a couple hours, but then I'll be fine. Don't worry. No, we actually take your feedback very seriously, and we've been able to alter or make our presentations that much stronger based on the feedback. Okay, because sometimes an outside perspective is really good. So we value that input, and I'm going to stop now and I've rambled enough. Does anybody have any questions or things that they would like to add? Go ahead, Carol.
This is from faculty, and this isn't the right department, but I'd love for it to be passed on. A shocking number of faculty have been threatened by students. It happened to me. I had to have police protection, and it was in writing, the threat, but death threats. And in the department where I am, we've seen a lot of it, and we'd love to feel more supported by the college in terms of that.
Carol,
and many of us don't feel the police were great, but we didn't feel the college supported us enough.
So one thing we thank you for sharing that, and I'm glad you did, because it's something that I actually want to add to the slide. See, this is where we have something called, and Lisa's part of this team, we have the care and prevention team. So way back when there was a shooting here on campus, we created this team called the care and prevention team. And what this team does is, for instance, Carol Davis experience, I'm just going to use you as an example. You received an email threatening. You can go right onto our website and submit, it's really easy, I've done it myself, submit a quick report of the incident, and you can even upload the email. And just like our HR complaints goes to all of us, when you submit an email in there, all the members of the care and prevention team get this, and that includes people on counseling, it includes Lisa Winter, it includes campus police. There's a whole team of people. They meet regularly and discuss, and on student judicial affairs. So there, just like I said, one instance might not be enough to go the route of discipline or even arrest, but each time one of you submits a complaint or inquiry on that page, it creates a history. And trust me, some things cross over. So you might submit something in the classroom, this person could become a student worker, and then it becomes an HR issue. And we look at that, we all talk. So it's really important for you to share those. And you might not feel that you were heard on that one time, but there might be another instructor or another student that experiences something later. And then we have that whole history. And like Michael Hudson said, it's sometimes that paper trail that will be the thing that gives us a good case later, because sometimes it results in that. Now, Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would. I want to reassure Carol and anybody else on the training today. Every incident submitted is looked at by everybody, and sometimes folk won't know what we do. It's imagine it like an iceberg. You submit it, but so much happens that may not be seen, but there is always follow-up, there is always checking, and we certainly don't want any member of our community feeling unsafe. So I'm sorry, Carol, that something happened and you felt unsafe, but that is something that if you still feel that way, you should reconnect with us so that we can work out what it is we can do to make you feel safer, if that's the case at the moment.
I guess I would like them to say that faculty would like more feedback, because often after we filed something, we don't ever hear. And in the case of mine, I had students in the class, so I didn't talk about it in the class, but when there was police outside the door, they sort of figured it out. And students would report to me seeing this student, but I didn't hear back from the college. I mean, that's fine that it's filed, but faculty should be kept somehow. I understand confidentiality, but to be told it's continuing or something. And in other cases, when students didn't show up when they were called in, then we felt like nothing happened. So there are multiple layers here.
Yeah, and you're right, Carolyn. Sometimes it's not straightforward, and there are other things occurring at the same time to address it. But you shouldn't ever feel uncomfortable contacting any one of us and say, I haven't heard, can you share with me? I would suggest that as well. In that case, it probably would have been, I don't know how recent it was, but it would have probably been Juliana or maybe Lena would be the two people.
This one was pre this team, but there have been other, other things. And once I started talking to other faculty in my department, the percentage was shockingly high of faculty who had been threatened.
Just on an aside, if you wanted to email me, and if it's something that you feel that you would like the CPT to talk to faculty about, I can certainly forward that to Brenda Benson. So if you do that, I'll let her know that there's a department that would like us to present.
Okay.
Yeah, and see, this is why it's good. We appreciate you sharing, because oftentimes when we hear the sharing is when we're able to reevaluate processes, and you never know, your sharing can change something. And like you said, we hope that all faculty knows once you submit it, it doesn't just go into some void, like, you send an inquiry to the IRS or whomever. I don't want to call them out, but one of those places where you submit something and never hear anything. I guarantee the CPT they're on it. There's been times where I'll send them something like an FYI, and they're like, oh yeah, we've discussed that person just last week. They really go into, take it very seriously. But yeah, the people that submit it may be curious, at least something saying, we hear you and we're working on it, So thank you for that. Does anybody else have in terms of, on the flip side, on the HR side, oftentimes if somebody complains about a fellow employee or manager, oftentimes we are unable to share what is occurring in that, because employees do have confidentiality. We might respond and say, thank you for that information, but it might not always be obvious what HR does in the backside, because we have unions, the other employee has protections, we do, and so there's certain things that we are able to share. But on the HR side of things, we definitely always make an effort to say, thank you for that, and we're on it. And hopefully the employees that are on the call today do trust that we are taking it serious, because we have a liability, but also all of us that work at SMC know we don't go anywhere. So we want this place to be a workplace of respect.
So Alan, I think we're almost out of time. There's just a couple more minutes. If there's any last questions or last thoughts, anyone want to share? No, we all good?
Oh, and so the most important thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that I'll be sending you your certificate of completion via email. Okay, so you'll get that, so you can, and I'll note it in Keenan Safe Colleges, so you don't have to get that enjoyable reply email that you probably are like, I know I have to do it. So thank you for completing the training. You'll be receiving your certificate, I'm hoping by end of week. That's my assumption. Tomorrow's my birthday. I'll be 41 and I'm taking the day off. But definitely today or on Friday, you'll be getting your certificate of completion. So thank you all for joining, and thank you to my colleagues for being here and assisting me with this training. I appreciate it greatly. And we look forward to seeing you guys' names or faces on upcoming trainings, because while we're in this remote setting, we're definitely coming together and trying to create some great offerings. Linda just recently did a whole series on Title V, and Michael Hudson on communication practices. And so we're coming up with some great ideas to assist you all in this remote environment.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Alan. Wonderful.
You're welcome.
Well done.
I'll talk to you later, Lisa.
Yeah, I've got to get on a call now, so but
Okay.
I'll call you later.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.